Jumping into God's word here. Who's hungry for the word of God? Who's hungry? Awesome. Hands are good. I want to hear it. It's okay to talk about it. Even if you've got masks on. There we go. There we go. Hungry. I want to be changed. I want to become like Jesus. We're going through a sermon series here. We're going to be finishing it up here this week and next week through the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5. So if you have your Bibles or Bible apps, you can turn there to Matthew chapter 5. And today's focus is going to be verses 10 through 12, but we're going to read starting back at verse 2. This is the beginning of what's called the Sermon on the Mount. It might be more considered a hillside, depending on where you're at. We don't have mountains here to be considered a mountain in Worthington. But sermon by Jesus on the Mount there, Mount of Olives. It's the beginning, as Matthew captures of it, the beginning of his teaching and ministry. Let's join me here, friends. I'm reading from the ESV translation. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." There's a story shared by Voice of the Martyrs. Voice of the Martyrs is this ministry to make the rest of the world aware of those who are facing persecution in the name of Jesus and for the cause of Jesus Christ around the world. And Voice of the Martyrs Canada shares a testimony from India. He says, over 150 years ago, missionaries of Great Britain and Germany were reaching northeast India and preaching the gospel and sharing the gospel there. And one Indian church leader shares of the effect of the gospel at that time. There was a man and his wife in one village with 2 children, and they were converted. They came to know and surrender and trust in Jesus Christ. Their spontaneous faith spread throughout their entire village, angering the leader of that community. He summoned this particular man where it started. He summoned him before the village, and demanded him renounce his faith in Christ or face execution. The man facing this crucial decision, in turn, sang a song. We've heard it sung, many of us have heard sung around this world. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. Enraged, the chief ordered the archers to shoot his 2 children as both of his boys lay twitching on the ground. The chief asked, "Now will you renounce your faith? You've lost both your children, and you will lose your wife as well." And the man replied, singing once again, "Though no one joins me, still I will follow. Though no one joins me, still I will follow. Though no one joins me, still I will follow. No turning back, no turning back." The chief was beside himself with rage and ordered that his wife be put to death. And now he asked him one final time, "I'll give you one more opportunity to deny your faith and live." there's no one for you left in this world. The persecuted for Christ are rejected, forsaken, targets in this world, seen as lost and rejected, weak. But in God's eyes, they are in fact favored. It's the paradox of the kingdom and the king's values. Would you join me in prayer, friends? Holy Spirit, we pray, we need you now, and we need you to open our hearts. We recognize even on our own, we are desperate. We are dependent on you to not just merely intellectually be tickled by your word, but to let our hearts be changed. And so, Spirit, do that work. Open us up. Help us to respond. Lord, help us. Help us to want you no matter the cost. And Spirit, come upon me, your broken servant, to preach your word. Teach your word, Jesus. Guard my mouth and guard my heart and my mind. In your name we pray. Amen. We're coming to the end of the Beatitudes here. The blessed are. That word blessed means favored by God, remember? We've walked through the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness and such. Last week you had McNay preaching on blessed are the peacemakers. How was that? Wasn't it a blessing to have McNay preach? What a testimony of God's work in our community even, and even in this house. In the midst of sin in our community, in this world. God is good. Jesus, in these Beatitudes, we've seen what we've called the upside-down kingdom, where he displays here and says, favored by God are these people who display these values that are not consistent with what the world values. It's upside down. Blessed are the persecuted. The persecuted. They're rejected. They're isolated. They're forsaken. Everything's been taken from them. Or they're being harmed. And yet God makes it clear they are favored. They're going through pain. They're going through suffering. They're losing in this world. They're not winning. God favors them. God favors them. Later, Jesus says in John 15, verse 20, remember the word that I said to you, a servant is no greater than his master. If they persecuted me, you can go to the next slide there, Trent. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. There's a consistent theme of the value that God places on those of us as we suffer for his sake. And it goes even further to say this from Paul and Timothy. He says, indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Jesus Christ will be persecuted. Let that sink in. If you're here as a follower of Jesus, maybe some of you are just checking things out, and that's cool. Welcome, we're glad you're here. But if you're here as a follower of Jesus, this is an expectation that we should have, that we're going to face persecution in this life, in living the life of Christ and following him. Now, persecution, let's be clear. What does this mean? The word persecution, the word there means to pursue something. Okay? It means to become a target. So persecution is to pursue someone with intent to harm, if you will, to target someone or some group of people. But why? What's the point of this target? What's the substance of this? Well, we see what Jesus says here. Persecute, you're targeted for righteousness' sake. It's not just for any arbitrary reason. There's a focus here to this. For righteousness' sake. Now, we unpacked the word righteousness early on when Jesus explained God favors those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. That word is twofold. That word is twofold. That's the righteousness of God, of following his ways, of obeying him, And honoring him with our lifestyle, and especially starts with our hearts, friends. Righteousness starts with our hearts, a right relationship with God. But that also is expressed in right relationship in this world, justice in this world. This word righteousness is filled with action and the consistency of the heart with action, not merely the words that come out of our mouths. Later, Paul would tell Timothy, guard your life and your doctrine, the teaching of the truth, because by it you will save yourself and your hearers. Oftentimes in our tradition, what we call evangelicalism, we can focus heavily on what is said to the exclusion of how we live. To the exclusion of justice in this world. Jesus is making it clear here. Blessed are those who are targeted for seeking the shalom of God, the peace of God, the right relationship of God and with man in this earth, living before him. Now, Jesus has been unpacking this with these Beatitudes themselves. This isn't just in the abstract in terms of righteousness. He's already practically laid it out here. What does righteousness look like? It looks like being poor in spirit, mourning, being meek, hungering and thirsting after righteousness, being merciful, pure in heart, and peacemakers. What Jesus is getting at here is when we live out the character of the kingdom, you will rub the world the wrong way. Do you get that? When you live out the character of the kingdom, you will rub the world the wrong way, but for all the right reasons. When we're poor in spirit, what we're proclaiming, what we're living out is that we are impoverished and we're utterly dependent upon God. It confronts self-reliance in this world. It confronts this sense of independence and autonomy that our culture so greatly loves. It confronts pride. Blessed are those who mourn. Those who mourn expose sinfulness and evil in their lives. They recognize that we are broken, and this confronts this sense that, we know we're all decent people. We're all good. We make bad choices, but we're good. No, we're corrupt. We are broken as human beings. And we need a radical change. Those who mourn recognize sin in their lives, and it makes other people uncomfortable because we're calling us out as sinners in this world. We don't like to hear that. The meek live out this humility and gentleness. Remember, meekness is not weakness, but power under God's control. And that meekness rubs against those who are proud and seek control over others for themselves, who seek to apply and abuse power and authority for selfish ends. Those who lack self-control, who do not want to come under God's control, but just give in to their desires or impulses. The meek rub the world the wrong way. The hunger and thirst for righteousness, those expose what true priorities are in terms of loving God and loving justice and righteousness, right relationship with him in this world. It confronts misguided priorities. It confronts an absence of character. It confronts injustice. The merciful expose the self-centeredness, the prejudice to elevate ourselves or our people group above others. Racism, the arrogance. It exposes our need to act and not just feel on behalf of others. The pure in heart expose the hypocrites. It's not enough to say one thing. It's not enough to show up. It's not enough to look good publicly, but to be true to Jesus through and through. Expose the fakers and the posers. And the peacemakers call out the peace fakers. Those who pretend that all things are good, but behind they gossip and stab in the back, or they post on Facebook rather than seeking peace God's way. They're violent or aggressive, and they seek to tear others down. Or they're just avoidant. peacemakers, step towards. All of these characteristics of the kingdom cause us to step towards when we're instinctively desire to step away in relationship with others and with God. Kingdom character, friends, it rubs this world the wrong way. It will, for all the right reasons. Persecution, Jesus is kind of getting at here, it's not being ridiculed for being obnoxious and being disrespectful, being dishonoring, for being ridiculed for being a hypocrite and calling out the difference between your life and your words, what you claim. That's not persecution. It's for living for Christ, displaying, living out the kingdom of the character. The purpose of persecution as a result then is to silence us. Jeff Dunham, a comedian, has this puppet that he has called Ahmed. He says, "Silence! I'll kill you!" It's his theme. And the purpose of persecution is to silence us. It's to shut us down by intimidation, by threats, by exclusion, by discrimination. The persecution is to shut down the gospel, the good news, to shut it up. And at some point in time, we recognize when we begin to experience this persecution, we start to face questions and we start to have our cage rattled that there's a cost to this Jesus thing. That, like, it hurts. Like, it's not all tiptoeing through the tulips. And the persecution Satan seeks to plant a seed of doubt. Oh, God's not really that good. He's not that faithful. And to move from doubt to discouragement that it's not really that it's not worth it. It's not worth the cost. It's not worth what I might lose. And then to move to defeat, from doubt to discouragement to defeat. I give up. I'm not gonna step out. I'm not gonna look different. I'm not gonna follow Christ's example in his way. And then finally we desert him. We desert Christ. Don't rock the boat. We'll join the crowd. Just follow along. Just keep your head down. Just go along with the crowd. And it's not even conscious. It's just what you do. That's what Satan wants to do. He wants to shut down the gospel, the good news, for others being saved and coming to know Jesus Christ. Now he points out here in verses 11 through 12, he says, specific ways that this happened at that time. Those who revile you, persecute you, utter all kinds of evil against you. What would happen at that time? There would be public shaming. Reviling is to be shamed. Okay? It's to just strip you down. And they did it physically. Like Jesus was on the cross, he was naked. Part of the crucifixion, the purpose of it, was to shame him and any followers. Like, look, you're a disgrace if you follow that. I mean, look at that. Beatings, whippings, any way that they could bring shame about. Reviling. Persecution, again, that targeting emotionally, physically, economically, uttering all kinds of false things against you. This would be character assassination. One of the things that they loved to do and say about Christians early on was to take the communion, what they call the communion, and they would call it love feasts at times, or different things like that, or taking the body and blood of Jesus. They would call Christians cannibals because they were eating someone. They were eating Jesus. And that became one of the ways that just kind of spread this viral thing. These people are weird. They're out there. They're cannibals. They eat people. Or their love feasts, which was that communion of communion is not just communion with God, but with each other, sharing love with each other. They accused Christians of having these meetings where they had sexual orgies. Again, they were trying to defame the name and the reputation of Christians. They would find different ways to do so. Don't they do that? Doesn't that happen today too? Like, oh, you're bigoted. You're a Christian. You're like an actual Christian. Like you actually the Bible. You read that and you believe that. Narrow-minded. You're a bigot. You're anti-intellectual. All of a sudden, you're put into a box. And that box is a very negative label, and this conversation gets shut down, right? That happens. We get labeled. We get put in boxes. You'll notice, I remember, especially like in high school students, in school, when you actually truly follow Jesus, people get uncomfortable. And so you stop getting invited to stuff. You start getting excluded from certain spaces. Because they don't want you there because they're going to be convicted by your presence. It's not because you're a jerk, and not because you're a snob and you're looking down on them, just because you live a pure and holy life and you're pursuing holiness. Feel convicted. So you don't get invited. You get excluded. They don't want your voice. They don't want your perspective. There's discrimination that happens. We see this in policy and in legal lawsuits. We've seen this played out with Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A, all these agendas that get pulled out in terms of like with Chick-fil-A especially, with, I'm having a senior pastor moment. What is it called when you tell people not to go shop at a place? Boycotting, there it is. These things like that, because they stand for the biblical definition of marriage between a man and a woman. Persecution is real and it's happening around us. And it seeks to silence us. But we will not be silenced. The gospel cannot be silenced, amen? And we must expect that if we're going to follow Jesus, there's a cost. I have a couple of videos throughout my sermon here that I want to share with you all, just for inspiration and encouragement. And I'm going to play one here. This is for persecution happening in Sudan, South Sudan. Now, for those of you who know Pastor Friday, his people group, his family are refugees from South Sudan. They were persecuted people, Christians from South Sudan. Check this out.
Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword?
For decades, the minority Christians of Sudan have been tormented.
Hundreds of churches have been destroyed and believers have been killed by the millions.
Christians have been jailed. You can see Christians have been tortured.
I lost my mother, brothers and sisters.
We have lost a lot of friends.
My name is not important. I suffered for Christ, and my suffering has led me to learn so many things. In this country, it's very difficult to be a Christian. When I was persecuted, I was in prison. There was no lawyer, there was no friend. There was nobody. I have to ask the difficult questions. God, where are you? Why is this happening? I face a lot of torture, suffering. Every moment they torture me, hate grows in my heart. And because I am angry, it fuels the anger in the hearts of these officers to even torture me more. Days become longer, nights become longer. But as days passed and I was beaten up, I was bleeding, I was on the floor, I said, God, if I have to suffer for you, I just don't want to die with hate. To die hating is worthless. I want to be free. I decided to pray to God to give me a miracle of love. And I don't have to live in two prisons, prison physically and in prison spiritually. he just affirmed to me that I am with you. I'm suffering with you too in prison. And with that, God opened his heart to me. I decided to choose the Jesus way, just to love them even when they don't deserve it. I begin to speak to everyone in the prison. They beat me more and they torture me more. When the evil attacked me, they faced the love of God. And when they go through the love of God, the power of the evil cools down. When we are persecuted, we still have to love those who persecute us, because it is not about us, it is about Jesus Christ. Many of us might say we don't have the energy, we don't have the strength to love these people. But I would say, just like God did it for me, you can ask him to give you the strength, to give us the miracle to love them.
It's a powerful testimony of what God's doing in South Sudan, that we're going to expect persecution, but it doesn't have to poison us and stop us from sharing the gospel. I want to share this quote here from R.T. France. He's a New Testament scholar, especially in the book of Matthew. He says it's this visible distinctiveness which arouses the hostility of others and leads to the slander and persecution which the ninth beatitude celebrates. Disciples, therefore, must be both distinctive and involved. Neither the indistinguishably assimilated nor the inaccessible hermit will fulfill the mandate of these challenging things. If you choose to follow Christ and live a godly life, you will be persecuted, because it will be public, it will be seen, and it will rub the world the wrong way. But there's blessing in that. There's blessing in this, friends. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus completes the second half of this verse in 10. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sakes, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. 11, he says, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. Now remember in the Beatitudes here, verses 4 through 9, the promises are future-oriented. They will experience this in the future. But verses 3 and verse 10 are all in the present tense. So we talked about at the beginning here, there's what's called this book ending. The beginning and the end are the same, which tells us that creates a framework for everything in between. All right, it's like a sandwich. The word in the beginning and the end there that promises is, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. For ours is now. What he's saying is, this is the guarantee. Those who live like this, those who display the character of the kingdom, because it's in your heart then, you are members of the kingdom now. You are guaranteed the rights to the kingdom now. And it can't be taken. It is what you are. And it can't be undone. It is now. It's not just a future hope. It has future implications, as we see. Your reward is great in heaven, clearly. Future-oriented. But we don't have to wonder between now and then whether that will happen or not. What he's saying is it's a guarantee. It's done. Once again, if you have a right relationship with Jesus Christ, if you come to God through Jesus, trusting in him, if you let the Lord Jesus sit in the throne of your heart, you're living that out. It's guaranteed. That's a great promise, friends. Consider this quote from John Piper. Jesus can say, rejoice and be glad, because he knows beyond any shadow of a doubt that the reward of heaven will more than compensate for any suffering we must endure in the service of Christ. There's an issue of trust here. Is whatever we lose here and now, is it worth it? Well, Jesus was in heaven before he came to earth, and he went back. It was that good. But he sees it. He knows exactly what's there for us. Later, Paul would express this in Romans 8. He says, if we're children, and then we're heirs of God with Christ, fellow heirs with Christ, but provided that we suffer with him in order that we may be glorified with him. This is kind of the litmus test. The fakers and the real thing. Persecution will squeeze us and find out what's really inside of us. Are we truly followers of Jesus? If we are, we will suffer with him. But Paul says this, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. There's a perspective shift that has to happen for us, friends. Again, this is not our best life. We exist here and now, if we're followers of Jesus, as his mission, as his agents, to see that the world knows Jesus and the world will be saved, because this is going to burn. And we don't want to see the rest of the people in this world burn with it. The cost is worth it. Not only for what we will experience, but for the lives saved. There are present blessings. He says, rejoice and be glad. And if we're reading this and we're not a follower of Jesus, and we're like, what the heck? Or even some of us who have been followers, we get caught up in this American culture of comfort and entitlement, and we can have whatever we want. We're so weak here. We don't experience what our brothers and sisters around the world experience. We don't know what persecution is. We face it, but we don't know what it is compared to what they face every day. And they rejoice and be glad. Why? Because what we value is not of this world. Because our priority isn't losing our comfort, isn't losing our friendships, isn't being ridiculed and losing favor among others. Our comfort is in the favor of God. Our priority are his purposes. Why can we also be rejoice and be glad? Well, Paul displays this like in Philippians 3. He says, I consider everything lost. I consider everything trash, rubbish. It's actually cow manure, but maybe a more graphic word for it. It's all of it. It's crap compared to knowing Jesus. Let me know him and let me suffer like him. I want to know him in his sufferings, because there's something special, friends. The early church got it. There's things that we can know about God and know about Jesus that only happen in suffering and persecution. You see, when we start walking in the footsteps of Jesus, we know him. And when we walk in those footsteps where we're being ridiculed, where we're being persecuted, we will know Jesus, and we will know God in ways that we cannot otherwise. And we'll find intimacy there. We'll find freedom there. We'll find glory there. A joy that's deep and rich, because it's grounded in heaven and eternity. Furthermore, we can rejoice and be glad because we also know God is working. The efforts of persecution have always been used by the enemy to try to stop and silence the movement of Jesus. But as Tertullian, one of the early church fathers, said, persecution, the martyrs of Christians, the blood of Christians is the seed of the gospel. There's something God does in transforming opposition into gospel momentum. The God who created all things is powerful to translate opposition into momentum. In all things, he's working for good. He said the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. Consider this other testimony from Christians in Iraq.
When this happened with the Islamic State 2 years ago, I start talk about my story.
Throughout its Iraq campaign, ISIS has been targeting Christians. That's why many have fled here to the safety and protection of northern Iraq.
ISIS, always they were telling you are infidels. If you want to stay, you have to convert or pay taxes or we have to kill you.
They coming, escape from Mosul, from Sinjar, and coming here like refugees.
This is a country just marred by violence.
No one believed in forgiveness. The only one believed just Christian. We are Christian from, the first century. As a people, we are proud as, Iraqi and Christian. We are suffering not just a couple of years ago. ISIS is just one face of the devil. We are facing with the same devil 14th century ago. I know Muslim very well. One time they blew up my church. They attacked me and was during the mass. One time I got shot in my leg. Still the bullets in my leg, the left. And I've been kidnapped for 9 days. It was Sunday after the morning mass. I was kidnapped by one of the militia. They were armed with a Kalashnikov and immediately opened the window and they say, if you are going to do anything, we will shoot you immediately. They opened the door and they took me. They told me, take this and cover your eyes. If you are going to open your eyes, we'll put bullets in your head. When we arrived, I don't remember what happened, but when I wake, I found there was blood. He broke my nose. And I heard one of them say, bring me the hammer. I just feel something hit me in my face. So I realized that one of the teeth is in my mouth and the blood. And he told me, don't be worried. You have many teeth and we have all the night. They used to put the pistol in my head and every time, click, click, click. It's better to finish it. Because suffer itself, that means you are dying every minute. After 9 days, they released me. I remember when I reached our church, so the priest was outside. When he hugged me, that time I started crying. And he told me, never mind, you are okay. To me, I forgive them. That forgiveness is the gate to understand what's been the grace of God. We have to forgive because to let the grace transfer from generation to generation. If not, that means the pain and the hate will close the way to the grace of God. We have to take care about kids. They are the future. The Islamic State, the ISIS, they destroyed all our villages and houses. Now we became one house. They destroyed all our churches. Now we became one church. So thank you, because Jesus united us again. We are still that salt in the food. Without us, it's gone. Without forgiveness, that's mean asking for revenge will be acceptable. But forgiveness, that's mean it's over. So what I am asking you, it is to forgive them. We have to forgive.
When watching this video, I was so touched by the perspective. Did you notice how he said, thank you? We were a spread out church. We were many churches. Now we are one church. We are in one house. What a blessing to have that kind of, be able to have that kind of perspective. As we come to this time, for instance, we're responding to the Word of God here this morning. Maybe it's your perspective that needs to shift here. You realize that your reward is in your moment. Your reward is in what you have now. But if we suffer for Christ now, we'll have His joy and peace forever. Your perspective maybe needs to change. Your priorities need to change, and that needs to surrender now. Maybe it's a change in your response to the persecution that we experience and feel in this time. And not see it and take offense to it and make it personally, and I'm hurt and I'm wounded and self-pity. But see it as an opportunity for the gospel. You need to ask yourself an important questions. Is my life rubbing the world the wrong way? Do I live out the kingdom character? Am I isolated, alone, or is there hypocrisy in my life? Do I live out the kingdom character such that I'm rubbing the world the wrong way for all the right reasons? Or maybe your heart needs to be moved here to be praying for brothers and sisters around the world who are facing these threats in very pronounced ways. The intimidation is real and it's daily. And the cost to follow Jesus. And we need to pray, and you need to be moved today to pray for the persecuted church. Blessed. God favors those who suffer like Jesus and for Jesus. We will experience His joy and peace forever. God is doing something. Enemy can't stop us. It can't stop the gospel. It will have its way. To finish up the story I started with, remember that chief who was putting to death the family members of that father, of that man. He killed the wife. He says, now I will give you one more opportunity to deny your faith. There's no one, you have no one left in the world with you. And the man sang one more time. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning back. Eventually, the courage of this man and his family, it led to this chief crumbling and surrendering to Jesus Christ. Even though he was left to live, he didn't know, he didn't learn himself that this had happened. He had learned later. His call was simply to be unashamed of the gospel. His death, their deaths, his family were tragedy and they were wrong. Not something that God allows lightly. Yet the gospel can't be stopped. And God will use the opposition of the enemy to advance and let it come through us. Let us stand. Let us be worthy to suffer like Jesus, that the gospel may go forward and the kingdom advance. Amen?